Just to get the ball rolling,
Sure.
I was going to ask, abortion, reaction from the ruling, and you've said that you were against abortion, even it says right, even in the case of rape, incest, or mother slave.
Well, you know what? We'll get you information on our heartbeat bill. Mm-hmm. And then with that, you can take a look at that and give you a little more depth of what it is we're trying to do, because that's one of the pieces I think that has a likelihood of going through the House. We're getting more people because there is there's, as you know, there we're extreme on the right or the left. On the far right, it's under no circumstances at all can there be an abortion, and on the left, under any circumstance at all, up until even birth, there can be an abortion. So we think there's somewhere in the middle. Heartbeat would cover probably 2/3 of abortions that take place. I think with the exception of for the mother's health, we have a pretty, that's one of the things we're very concerned with, and it's always about life. I just tell you, have any of you been to Washington for the March for Life? It's, you know, it's an incredible event. And I'm not talking about, it's reported that a couple hundred people showed up. Well, they miss it by about 495,000. There's usually about 500,000 people down there, but it is the most peaceful, prayerful, happy assembly in Washington. It's just, there's just nothing like it. And on the other side of that issue, it's angry and destroying public property and burning things down and threatening people's lives. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not sure I understand this. So I think on that piece alone, and most people don't understand, the Supreme Court ruling said, well, we're going to return to the states the responsibility that they should have on this. 50 states get a chance to weigh in. And I had lunch with Justice Scalia when I first got into office, and I thought it was interesting what he said. So we were talking, he said, you're a big pro-life guy. I said, well, my wife's 1 of 9, I'm 1 of 5. My wife and I have 4 children right now. We lost 1 child between 1 and 2 because of an ectopic pregnancy. So I'm very much pro-life. He said, well, Mike, what's always bothered me, that 50 states would dodge their responsibility and turn it over to 9 former attorneys and hope that somehow they rule in their favor. I said, I never looked at it that way. He goes, that's what's happened on this. He said, it should have stayed in the states. It never should have come to the Supreme Court. Well, and what we've seen that happened last week was the Supreme Court said, you know what? Let's return it to the states. Let the states decide. And then it becomes a much more personal issue. I will say this. I think that for years, I've sat with people that would say, my personal preference would be pro-life, but the Supreme Court made that decision, and we're not going to challenge what the Supreme Court says. I just think that the pro-life people for 50 years thought they had a case that made sense and never deviated from it. Their message was always peaceful and prayerful and very serene. What happened last week, I think it was pretty much anticipated what the court was going to find. So I keep hearing, well, there's going to be demonstrations, there's going to be people very upset, they're going to burn things down, or they're going to break things, and there's going to be violence. I said, that doesn't make sense to me. It makes no sense. So that's where we are right now. We'll see what happens.
So just going back, you're touting the heartbeat bill.
Yes.
And that allows abortion under what circumstances?
Well, I think that all of us, anybody who's visited a doctor, what's the first thing a doctor does? They wear a stethoscope for a reason, not just because they play a part in some play. The first thing they do is they check your pulse or they check your heartbeat. And what we've said is once you detect a heartbeat, that child should not be aborted, with the exception of the mother's health. So now I got to tell you, I don't know that that's what will finally go to the floor, because I think we'll have a lot of people weighing in on it. I think right now, what do we have? About 115, 120 co-sponsors on that. It will not go to the floor this year. You know that, right? Okay. A lot of people don't understand that. So what we're trying to do, Mike, is get to the next session, depending whether we're in the majority or not. If we're not in the majority, it will never get to the floor. It'll generate a lot of participation. But I'm really interested to see what the states do now. How do the states look at this? And individual states have the ability to develop their own view on this. But I really it's going to be interesting, because I look at this as a different dynamic that takes place here. I mean, we are appalled as a country anytime we see the loss of life someplace else and say, gosh, what's going on in Ukraine right now? This is horrible. They took a maternity hospital. The Russians blew up a maternity hospital. These were pregnant women, and these were children who were just born, and they killed them. And then on the other hand, they'll say, but in our country, we have a different view of that. So I'm not comparing the two of them together. I'm just comparing the thinking on it, because we all can agree that what's happened in Ukraine is absolutely horrible, and the loss of life is absolutely horrible. So what's the old saying? You can see the splinter in your neighbor's eye, but not the plank in your own. I just think there's a way of addressing these things. I would hope people would look at it that way. The other thing,
so
there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. I understand that a pregnancy doesn't always happen when the mother would like it to happen, but there is an adoption option that is out there. So, and we've worked on that for many years too, to make sure that people know that there is an adoption option. I think the faith-based community is very good about saying, listen, if that's a child that came at the wrong time in your life for a lot of different reasons, we do have a home for that little girl or that little boy.
I think, at least locally, Senator Mastriano's version of his bill, I mean, he's said flatly, he even told us at a campaign event.
Yeah. I've read that. I've read what he
I
said.
mean, flatly no
Yeah,
exceptions,
yeah.
rape, mother's health, just if there's a heartbeat, I think after 6 weeks,
Yeah.
there's no abortion.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, I mean, that's his position. I understand that.
well,
I think our position is
mean,
based on what it is that we think
Is
may
that
not be ideal. It's not going to be, listen, there's no piece of legislation that since I've been there that's perfect for everybody. We offer an opinion, we offer a view that we have a lot of agreement on. And I think what we all do in our lifetime, it may not be exactly what I want, but does it get closer to the issue? And I think what we proposed is much closer to the issue.
I think, is that the right approach? If you have, I mean, it's gonna come down to legalese potentially between different states.
It doesn't everything. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I've been the victim of a lot of lawyers, but I'm not a lawyer myself. So, yeah, listen, there's going to be people weighing in on it, but that's the beauty of who we are.
so as the bill now stands, the heartbeat bill.
Yeah.
If there's a heartbeat, that stops the abortion option,
With the exception if there's a mother's health.
with the exception of the mother's health.
yeah.
Okay.
That's where it stands today.
Sure.
If you understand. I mean, we think that is a compromise that addresses 2/3 of the abortions that are out there. But by the same token, does leave opportunities for people who say it's not as far to the right as I would like it to be, and people that says, well, it's much farther to the middle than I want it to be, but does it make sense? And I just would tell you, I don't know of anything that's more indicative of life than a heartbeat. It's the first thing that everybody checks, and whether it's in an accident that takes place, either a traffic accident or an industrial accident, the first thing they do is put the stethoscope to you or check your pulse. And I think if that's not an indication of life, and if people say, I don't really believe it's life, then the question is, well, what would you use to determine if it's life? And I think we've come up with something that's pretty easily understood. You don't have to have a medical degree to understand that.